it up, spread it around and kick it back. Until these lazy days, I keep my feet up to my knees. Yeah, praise the ways the curtains closed, like the shady ways, and when we're weaving through the shadows of this hazy maze.
Okay, let's see here. So make sure I still have Discord up right quickly. Of course it doesn't want to load now as much. Okay, so make sure Discord is still pulled up. Okay, well I guess I'll just do it here because I don't know what that's saying. Okay. But I do have the YouTube chat up, so if you're in the live chat, I'm on YouTube, so I'm gonna drop that link really quick. Let's see here. And then we'll get started here. I'm just making sure I'm pulling the chat up really quick for YouTube. Yo, what's good, Josh? What's up, bro? Yeah, I was gonna say I was gonna do that on Discord, but I'll probably sit on Discord here in a little bit. But gonna go over, pretty much the easiest buys I think of all time. And how I was attempting those shorts after we got to that specific level. I mean, there was one of them that I actually thought was, well worth actually trying and, fit the criteria of, what, we're looking for. But I would say overall, there's a couple areas. I'm gonna go over that I thought were really good and some levels. But if you had some questions as well about, any part of the system or anything like that, this would be a good time to ask, and I can go over a lot of stuff. But those stocks that we were talking about, those were some of those were good. The eBay, and I'm just an obsession with Chipotle, so that's pretty much what that's the one that I look at. That's also a part of NAS. So okay, so coming into I didn't drop a pre-market analysis because I think we were on the call, but we obviously had seen when we were talking about in the pre-market analysis that we wanted to see more of a move lower on oil. And so, I mean, pretty much those lows that we were looking at 95 whole level a barrel, those were looking like, like a snag pretty much. Because the market open was right here yesterday, and that candle that flew up pretty much manipulated so many people, it's ridiculous. And then that was overnight, so we didn't even see that. But then I would say, like we said, we've seen the breakdown. This was essentially just structure. So people will see what they see, but this was the low, this was the high, and then price goes lower low, lower high, lower low, right? And starts to break down. And then they came up and kind of got buyers to buy too early, I thought, of the area. And then it just filled the FVG 103 and just slides over. So then coming into today, the very similar thing. Hold on, let me turn this down really quick. But looking at the, like I said, the oil here, um, at that New York Open today, 8:30, obviously the very first 15-minute candle on crude and the first 5-minute candle pretty much showed that if it was going to fall lower, that we were going to ball higher for NQ. And so, I mean, this is the candle that basically did it all pretty much. I mean, you have the New York Open, the first 15 5-minute candle, but that 5-minute close being a lower low was pretty much a sign of structure that, they already had the low of the day here at one point. Price runs up, fails to ever break past uh, this level here, 97.50 half, and then at London Open, price falls and makes a new lower low. And so that's those signs that we're seeing on the body candle closures of these specific areas, and then looking at that higher time frame location, it just proves and confirms levels. And so I'm just building into the bias of like pretty much how I was anticipating, those shorts though too in certain spots, but was really just, there's a thing called being in the pocket and out of the pocket. So some of those trades, even when you hit, break even, or you're able to scale out of 1.5R, and then it, as soon as that 1.5R is delivered, it just snaps back and comes back to your entry. That's really like also signs that are confirming to you that price is in a different direction. And so, yeah, you may be able to get out of there with a small loss, or you may be able to get out of there with, a small win on like a, 1.5R. But at the same time, there comes a point where I think about 2 to 3 times, if you feel that snapback type of situation, then it's like, okay, the direction might be going, a little bit more against you. So, but the way we play the edge and what we see, it also just kind of plays into, just how the market environment is and what you're feeling. But I would say like now when you go back over the tape and you look at your own stuff, and I'm looking at my notes, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm writing down these price points where the bodies are closing like that and actually seeing that lower low, and then it's like you can basically see if they don't push into the fair value gap, which was like looking at this candle that actually broke the lows, they couldn't go past 50% of that, then it's definitely like almost like a tank to the downside at that point. So I'm going to compare NQ and oil here in a second, but I'm just kind of showing as well like how we were looking at that oil price and how it really helped us out. I feel like a little bit yesterday, but it could have been really a lot better just because of how it broke at New York Open yesterday, and then the same thing today. It just broke lower immediately. So okay, let's see here, and then on NQ, let's see here with dollar really quick. So dollar did pretty much exactly what we were talking about in the pre-market, which was continue down to this here. That's what was this level, 98? Oh yeah, 98 level. We were talking about this. So we broke the 98.250, and then it just seems like we're still making our way down to 97.60s, 97.50s. So I'm just gonna keep monitoring, just the price in that area, and then just really looking at like a daily bar from this perspective. So this candle here is like the area I'm looking at, and then 98 is like essentially where we're at right now. So it's gonna be like, what are we gonna do tomorrow? Are we gonna be able to find a bounce? We also have equal highs on an intraday time frame with a gap, right? So this gap is like major here on dollar index. And so could there be some kind of news that comes out that, supports price to push up to fill that gap, right? It really comes down to me, is on a daily bar, and on a weekly bar, excuse me. On a weekly bar here, if you look at where that aligns on the daily, right, being inside this candle here is where my focus is. It's like, what's going to happen if we can push down to those levels? Those would be the best levels, right? Because right now, if you were to plot a buy position on dollar, you're not inside that zone yet, right? So it's like the better area on dollar index to see a reversal, would be down in that area or farther down into like this area, right? So it'd either be like 50% of this area, so like right under this wick, or it'd be actually under this area and starting to play like this big candle here in the middle screen on the daily bar. And so just looking at that, that can help us a lot when it comes to NQ. And then, so we went over oil. So let's look at them all from a whole. And so, again, we've kind of reaffirmed this multiple times, but that FVG, right, at 25,000, or it was 23,000 whole level, once that filled 2 weeks ago, right, so this is the weekly bars, when that filled and immediately engulfed this candle, that's like an immediate sign on the higher time frame of bullishness. Now, we thought we would come a little bit lower possibly, but this was a good first level, but we were thinking maybe 21,700s, right? Back into this gap before we see this type of bounce, because now we're looking at all-time highs, right? This is YM here on the far left, this is ES in the middle, and then NQ on the far right. And so super far away to go to get to, I would say, 51,000, but it's obviously doable because it's went 3,000 points in 2 weeks. And then ES is the closest to me to achieving that. Okay, I'm about to look at the chat here too. ES is the closest one to achieving that new high. So let me see what you said here. DXY down generally means NAS. Yes, correct, because cheaper dollars to be able to purchase assets. Right, so if dollar index is going down, that's what you're pretty much thinking. You're gonna, especially when I played a lot of NAS 100, right? If you're familiar with that, basically just being NQ but on the CFD. And so when I used to play NAS, that's basically NAS 100 USD, right? Just like gold, XAU USD. So anytime you're looking at your dollar index first, like we went over, and we're reading more downside, it's cheaper dollars to buy assets, essentially is what that means. Right, so let's mark this up actually. I need to mark up that level, 97.50. And people are like, well, why do you have so many price levels on your chart? It's basically, well, not, I've only had like actually one person, but I'm sure that that's like a question that that like goes in, like in the new group, but like before, when I was doing this before, there would be people that would ask like, why do you have so many? But it's like, because people psychologically think about numbers in a specific way. Everybody turns 10, everybody turns 20, if God willing, right? Everybody turns 30, everybody turns 40, 50, right? So these 50 levels, 20, these quarters, everybody knows quarters, right? You've counted 4 quarters multiple times, right? 25, 50, 75, 100, over and over, right? So these psychological numbers are where people who don't have framework of the markets, they essentially just come in and say, I like 25, and they just buy 25, right? Or they do, you know, if they see 100, psychologically, they're going to play positions at 100, right? So that's how we're able to scale and look at certain areas of not only the number, like let's just say 97.50, but where is it in relevance to the candle structures of demand and supply. But yeah, to answer your question, I'm just gonna say DXY down usually means you know, assets are gonna be pushing up. And so let's go to NQ. All right, so this is daily 4 hour. So let me go here. I can still see this here. Excuse me. Yeah, so these levels just were relative to the week. I mean, this is literally the week low. Up to where we've currently made a low, right? And that's just to think, you know, 25,000, or excuse me, 24,000, what is this, 950 is a low? Let's just say 24,000, or excuse me, 25,000, right? Let's the market open, and we're at 26, so prices moved 1,000 points in 2 days. What? That's like crazy stuff, right? But when I look at it and I see, okay, we talked about these levels, 25,714 and then 25,800 look left, right? We're inside supply candles. We're looking at these areas as potential, right? When we're looking at this high as being the high, this being the low, and the retracement of this move now being in relevance to like these numbers here on your Fibonacci retracements that you took down yesterday, right? And so as those go up and retrace into the area, you want to keep your eye left and just kind of identify where there are levels of supply, because that's where longs that are inside of accumulations down here, and they're getting the markup effect now, higher high, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, as it continues to break these up candles on the way up, right? That's people basically, it's that bigger model of the buy model. So 4 phases: accumulation, markup, which markup is just higher highs and higher lows, then price distributes, something like this, where price, you know, it creates a distribution pattern, something like that, or something that goes like this, right, where you get that break, people try to buy, and you're able to just snipe here inside the FVG, and it falls. So it's like until we get into these special levels on higher time frame here with NQ, like 88.6, 26,200s and higher, and take like, liquidity inside these areas and see what type of supply we're working with, it's just going to continue to play the pattern. And it's crazy how they use the perfect excuse of all this war and all this different stuff, and just really getting everybody's opinions into it to push price this far, because nobody looks at, like I said, like those weeklies and sees how, that crazy that was to see that 25,000, 23,000 whole level on the weekly be filled. But if you look at a monthly as well, let's resize this and take those away. That was also that area from the monthly that we were seeing. So they used this pretty much to be able to go make all-time highs and fake people out potentially. But when you look at this, kind of just like we do like a 5-minute, 1-minute setup, as we're coming into this candle, now you're seeing individuals probably start to buy the market after 25.42. And not saying it's not wrong or right, but it's like for specific type of positions, not the in and out positions we take, but still understanding from the perspective of just the game in general, that people may start exiting inside of a massive supply candle because of, just like we look at on a 1 minute, noobs by tops and sell bottoms. So if that's true, then that means at this point they're in that threshold of, okay, tomorrow they're going to start buying, and then that could be the real area to tank it. Who knows, right? But that area does confirm that type of situation. But we're pretty strong on this week, so we'll see how that looks going into tomorrow. But the positions today, I just want to go over here really quick. Let me actually move it over to the other window here. And so we can go into the 15 and 5 here. Okay. Okay, so let's go to the 15 and 5 and like some 1 minute setup. So at the open, we had, let's see here, 18 minutes. Okay, cool. Where was the New York open? Okay, let me mark it again. Okay, so New York Open, excuse me, New York Open is here. So this 5 minute candle here on the right, this is going to be the New York Open. Why did it play not my jazz? Hold on, sorry guys. Market's open, maybe. Okay. So at the market open, the first 5 minute candle was super aggressive. So let's look at that on the 5 and the 1 minute here really quick, so we can get back into the context here. Okay, so this is going to be the 5 and the 1 minute here. So this candle here, right, that's 8:30. So this candle is the start of 8:30. As you guys can see, at the opening range, we all know that's when price usually moves the fastest, right? That's when the most manipulation happens, really inside that first 5 minutes. Well, I will say this, 8:29 to 8:30 is this candle right here. And that candle prints, and it would have looked just like this right before New York Open. Right, so this would have been like, you would have had to buy pre-New York, which I'm wanting to see the equities open, right? So I want to actually see this candle here, right? So in the first candle, so 8:30 to 8:31, you get a, what is that here? A 50 handle move up, right? And essentially what they're doing here is they're attacking the high on day at this point, right? The high on day was 25,715, somewhere in that area. And so that what they're doing in that first candle is they're pushing it up, right? Attacking as quick as they can that 25,700, getting FOMO, right? They're creating FOMO, and that move is so fast, unless you literally are taking that inside that 25,670s, right, or anywhere like inside down in here, right, 50, 5/7s, that would be the only way that I would say, like, if you took it up here, it's just dangerous at that point because of where it was looking like on the 5, right? So that was the first minute, was like a 50 handle move. Now when you go back and you look at that next candle, so this would have been 8:31 going into 8:32. The high is still available, as y'all can see here on the 1 minute. Now when they took the high was 8:33 to 8:34, and that body candle closure shows sign of strength, right? So this is 8:33 here, and that candle closes to into 8:34. Then 8:34 opens into 8:35, and then you get a new 5-minute candle. But at that point, as you can see here, right, when you hover over 34 to 35, you're still on that left side, still in the candle for 30 to 35. But obviously, as soon as I go over one 1-minute candle, we're now looking at that next 5-minute candle, right? And so at that point, when price closed higher on that 5-minute, if price continues up like it did to 25,750, and then comes back into this area and doesn't break, it's bullish. And so when you think about the order that we took today, I believe the first one, there was a 5-minute sign of weakness at 8:45 going into 8:50. Now this is where I said, I'd rather be wrong with my system and be able to break even and partial if I can on positions, but still be playing the criteria. I would rather do that than take useless trades and lose just to lose, right? And so, because it's just a part of the series of trades, you're not one to focus on just one trade, right? And so last 15 minutes of an hour, first 15 minutes of an hour, that's when I like to execute my orders. And so this was 8:45 going into 8:50. This was 8:50 going into 8:55, and then this was 8:55 going into 9 a.m. So how that actually looks on a 15 and 5 is interesting as well, because you can kind of see they break out on a 15-minute time bar, right? So they break this high and close a body, showing true sign of strength to me. And then what makes it kind of what made it kind of intriguing though for me to see was that how they engineered the liquidity overnight and how it consolidated between just two levels, right? Like really tight, 25,600 and essentially 25,560. That's just a 40 handle move for, since let's just say 2,300 hours would be 11 at night. So this was from 2,300 hours would be 11 p.m. Central Time Zone. So this would have been market open, so 6 p.m. So you're telling me from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. price just moved in a range from 40 points. I figured there was lots of liquidity under this area coming into it, because they obviously took out this when they moved price higher, right? And so that's where my bias was coming into. If we did find shorts, we could see areas like that delivered. And so now on that 15.5 as well, the next candle 9 a.m. to 9:15 engulfs and makes the new high, right? So looking at that on a 5 and a 1 minute, you go in, you study that 45, right? So 45 would have been here into 9 a.m. and you look at the price action here on the 5 minute. Now, when I took those shorts, I believe they were inside the 750s, I believe. Let me look at the 5. Yeah, because I would have had a 5-minute sign of weakness. So I'm going to move this one just really quick. Would have had the 5-minute sign of weakness and then start looking for that 1-minute mitigation to the downside. So let's say essentially that first order was similar to this. And what we can confirm if we're looking at that other window, on the higher time frame, or just like that 15.5 at the same time, is now that body candle closure, and you can always check line graph to know for sure, right, to see the true price. And so it's like as long as that body candle closure is higher and another one closes higher, obviously that was still bullish when this closes higher than here. But like I said, was in short here trying to get that push possibly back to the expansion candle here, which would have been 830 to 831, right? So just trying to play those buyers, play that New York low, and see if it was going to work in that area, because it was so overbought essentially, but at the same time it's not, you know. And so looking at this from this perspective now, it's a little bit easier to see, of course, right? But when you're playing it live and the orders are, you know, going, and it's, you know, and then it rejects the areas, that's where I'd say a lot of, you know, just understanding of 1 to 3 and 1 to 1 and setting your orders up a specific way is going to be very helpful. And so tried the shorts, I believe, there. Obviously they came back in here, and then the next area I had tried was closer to the end of 9, I believe, was at 15.5. Let me check the 15.5. That's what I remember. So yeah, closer to the end of 9, I was trying to play these 810s, so 25,000 810s, so it looked similar to this. Price had come up, taken out traders, gave a solid candle, an entry candle, and so I was looking for a similar thing here, you know. But again, when you're looking at the 5-minute, this was 9:55 going into 10, and then this was like 10 a.m. going into 10:05. So I wasn't really looking for it to, like I wanted it to happen between, you know, 10 a.m. and 10:15, and obviously I like 10:30, but I was looking for it to happen fairly quickly, right? Because if it didn't happen fairly quickly and get back down to 25,700, right, it was only making sense that they were probably filling this 15-minute little gap as much as they could, because it was really small, but it was definitely still there, and it was just going to do a bullish continuation, right? So those were the two areas that I was basically looking at on the stream, I believe, today. And then from there, I was pretty much at the point around 11:15 a.m. just when, you know, I said, like, you know, if we haven't found some kind of reversal or some kind of position that makes sense, then, you know, you can wait till the next day to play a position. And so they continued to, you know, make higher highs and higher lows, and price continued to hold those, you know, those support levels as they, you know, would clear each level, right? It's like a level of a game, 25.8, 25.9, 26,000, right? And so, you know, as they continue to, you know, push down dollar like we talked about in the beginning, it's only right that they can continue to push these potentially, right? Especially like on daily here, you know, up into, excuse me, 25,000, or excuse me, 26,300 or 26,400, you know, even by tomorrow, you know. But we'll see how the overnight plays, and just see what they give. But I mean, that was another thing I wanted to talk about really quickly, is just 4-hour, 1-hour price, and really just understanding, you know, what they've done from a 4-hour perspective and how they opened the market. Look what they did, right? They were at 25,330s. They opened the market back below old liquidity, right? Well, in that same area, 25,000 level. So they dropped the market price from 25.3 on a Friday back down to 25,000 whole level, and then they go ahead and run those consolidation lows that we were looking at from last week. And since then, they've just filled a new week opening gap and just rallied up price, right? But it's not like it's not expected, but it's just the way it looks when you see when you see how it is here on the 4-hour, and that gap, you know, just the manipulation to get to this point is insane. So we'll be on tomorrow morning to play NAS. We'll see what this overnight presents. You know, for me, in a bullish market, I pray that they capitulate overnight, and that means essentially just sell off and fall back into the range, because based on tomorrow, Wednesday, like I said, those lows from yesterday, that consolidation lows were interesting. If there is some kind of sell-off, I think those would be one of the best spots over time whenever that does happen. But until we reach those levels on daily and weekly, at this point, I'm pretty much going to continue to see the upside, right? Like, I don't see why, especially if ES can reach all-time highs, then it's almost we can start definitely looking at that 26.6. But we've seen all these. This is where we had a lot of the good buys, I would say. So I like the selection on buys, especially last week, and then just understanding now the location of, they're really gonna pump this price. They're really bringing down the prices of oil. Like, also, I would say, like, the good news that comes out now. Anything can happen. That's the key thing about the markets. Everything's unique. Anything can happen. I mean, tonight, tomorrow. So they'll use price to push price to hurt the traders, but they'll do it in times where people will FOMO out of say they had long positions from 25 or 24,500, and they get them to FOMO out in these crazy days down in here where they're creating these massive wicks down, and they're coming back and closing back in the range. Those were crazy days. Okay, so let's see here. So cool. Yeah, we'll look at what they give us for the overnight. But pretty much, I'll look at gold here really quick because we were following that. I mean, daily bar closed bullish, and they're still attacking that 48.50. So 4,900 up to 5,000 looks interesting still, as they still have the gap. So XXX USD, right? So dollar index. When dollar index is going down, essentially you're going to want to see gold probably push now into the FVG. All right, so 4,900 whole level. And then I think that was it. Thursday we'll look at crypto. We'll look at BTC, ETH. For sure those two, and then a couple other things. So let's see, one other thing. We went over oil, so cool. All right. Well, appreciate you guys watching, and for anybody watching the recording, appreciate you as well. And we'll be back again on the trade review for tomorrow.